We have seen how the knight was defeated. An arrow could pierce his armor, a wall of spears could stop his charge, and a gunpowder bullet could render his legacy obsolete. But the enemy that truly killed the knight wasn't a weapon. It was a bill. This is the story of how the most elite warrior in history was not conquered, but simply priced out of existence. In this video, we will uncover the economic collapse that made knights too expensive to be useful, and prove that in the end, the pen of the accountant was mightier than the sword. Part 1. The arms race to bankruptcy. The threats on the battlefield created a devastating arms race. As longbows and crossbows became more powerful, a simple suit of chainmail was no longer enough. To survive, a knight needed full plate armor. But this wasn't just any armor, it had to be the best. This meant commissioning a suit from master armorers in places like Milan or Augsburg. This was the equivalent of ordering a bespoke high-performance vehicle today. The steel had to be perfectly tempered to deflect blows without shattering. The joints had to be articulated masterpieces to allow for movement. The cost was astronomical, affordable only to the very wealthy. But as firearms improved, even this wasn't enough. Armorers had to make the breastplates thicker, a process called proofing, where they would test it by shooting it with a pistol. This made the armor heavier, requiring stronger, more expensive war horses. It was a vicious cycle. The cost of simply staying protected on the battlefield began to spiral out of control, pushing all but the richest nobles towards financial ruin. Part 2. The changing business of war. While knights were spending fortunes on personal equipment, the very business of war was changing around them. For centuries, the feudal system had been the standard. A king would grant land to a noble, and in return, that noble owed military service, bringing his knights to battle. But kings grew tired of this system. Knights were politically troublesome, driven by their own codes of honor and personal ambitions. Their service was often limited to just 40 days a year. So kings found a new, more efficient solution: mercenaries, companies of professional soldiers like the Swiss pikemen or Italian crossbowmen offered their services for cash. They were loyal only to their paymaster. A king could hire a large, disciplined army for a specific campaign and then dismiss them when the war was over. There were no lifelong obligations, no land grants, no political baggage. As the economies of Europe shifted from being land-based to cash-based, this new model became dominant. Kings began to levy taxes on their nobles instead of demanding military service. They used this cash to hire professional, disposable armies. The knight, once the cornerstone of the military, was becoming an expensive, inefficient freelancer in a world that now valued corporate armies. Part 3. The obsession with status. Facing military and economic obsolescence, the knightly class did not adapt. Instead, they doubled down on the one thing they had left: their status. Chivalry became more elaborate, tournaments became more spectacular, and the displays of wealth became more extreme. The armor they wore to tournaments became even more ornate and ridiculously expensive than their battle armor, often decorated with gold inlay and elaborate etchings. It was purely for show, a desperate attempt to prove their continued relevance. Their code of honor, once a practical guide for warriors, evolved into a complex set of courtly manners. They became peacocks in a world that now needed wolves. This obsession with demonstrating their elite status led them directly into the final, most devastating economic trap. A trap that often came disguised as the greatest celebration of a knight's life. We will reveal this ruinous event after this, Part 4. The ruinous price of a party. The single greatest expense a noble family might ever face was not a war, a ransom, or a castle. It was the cost of a knighting ceremony for their son. This was not a simple tap on the shoulder with a sword. It was a multi-day festival, a massive public declaration of wealth and power. The host family was expected to throw a feast for hundreds of other nobles and their entourages with rivers of wine and mountains of the most expensive food. But the real cost was in the mandatory gift-giving, or largesse. The host had to give luxurious gifts to all their important guests. This often meant new sets of silk or velvet robes for dozens of attendees. It meant giving fine swords, daggers, or even new war horses to their direct lord and powerful allies. The young knight himself would need a brand new spectacular suit of ceremonial armor, a magnificent horse, and a full entourage, all funded by his family. The financial pressure was immense. To fail to spend lavishly was to signal weakness and poverty, resulting in social humiliation. Records show that many lesser noble families went into crippling debt for generations, mortgaging their lands and their futures just to fund a single 3-day party. They were spending a fortune they didn't have to celebrate their entry into a profession that the world no longer needed. It was the ultimate act of economic self-destruction. So the knight was attacked on all fronts. On the battlefield, his armor was rendered obsolete by new weapons. In the ledger books, he was replaced by more cost-effective mercenaries. And in his own halls, he was bankrupted by the crushing social pressure to maintain an image of wealth. He became a luxury good in a world that now valued mass production, an artisan in an age that demanded the assembly line. The brutal truth is that knighthood didn't end simply because of bows or guns. It ended because the world could no longer afford it. The system that created the knight was devoured by the very economics it helped to build. This story of how economic forces can dismantle even the most powerful symbols is a crucial part of our series. If you believe these hidden financial histories deserve to be told, show your support by hitting the like button. And to see how this story ends, subscribe to The Knight's Journey and ring the notification bell for our final episode, The Last Sunset. Because history is not just shaped by heroes and villains. It is shaped by debt, by assets, and by the unforgiving logic of the bottom line.